Welcome to the Transformations Podcast. Here, guests and I will share our transformative experiences and will explore how to find excellence in life. Coach Kevin Kearns, welcome to the podcast. How you doing?
Good, Dr. Wiley. How are you? Been a long time, my friend.
I'm doing great. So I remember in 1995, 6, I lived in Japan. I was working for Tuttle Publishing. They transferred me to Boston, and somehow you and I got connected. I started training with you, weight training. You started training with me. What was the situation? I forget how we connected there in Boston.
So technically not weight training, functional strength training, right?
That's right. It was functional fitness.
I don't weight. People look at me like, you do a lot of curls. I'm like, I haven't done a bicep curl in 25, 30 years. So Jeez. No, I mean, we use.
Your biceps are huge.
Actually, do you know a veterinarian? Because these pythons are sick. I got you with that one anyway.
Please.
So there was a magazine that came out. I was training with John Frankel, who's now SBG South Korea. He came out of the Insanto Academy. If you remember, we were training in Somerville. And John and my trainer partner and I were over my house watching a UFC event. And a magazine was out with you on the cover. I forget the name of the magazine. And he was reading. He goes, "Hey, do you know Mark Wiley's in Boston?" I'm like, "What?" He's like, "Why don't you reach out?" I'm like, "Okay." And that was it. And I'm like, "Hey, my name's Kevin Kearns." Blah, blah, blah. Then I hassled you for a couple of days, and then we ended up started training. So that's basically how it happened. I'm like this. You can see I've got several more tattoos now, and right. I put this one on after what I went through. That's Thai for Sumbak, be relentless.
Okay, nice. Now, right now, I know, and I'm going to tell our listeners. You have trained a few 7,000 UFC.
No. 15.
15 UFC champions, fighters. You've published 2 books. You've got your own brand, Burn with Kearns. You're out doing seminars all over. You do Zooms with elementary, middle schools for anti-bullying programs. You've written 2 books, and I think if anyone just took a snapshot of your life right now or was introduced to you today, they would say, "Oh man, Kevin Kearns, alpha male, firing on all cylinders. What an amazing guy. He just started out and started running." But that's not the case.
No.
Your life was hard growing up. Tambuli Media was lucky enough to republish your book. Always Pick Last, about your childhood, the bullying, the slowness of your life getting started, the tragic loss of your father. And you had to build yourself up. And then you crashed again. Build yourself up, and then you crashed again. Build yourself up, and that's why you're on the Transformations Podcast, because you've transformed yourself so many times. You went from 0 to hero to 0 to double hero, while I went to double X.
We'll fix that. Don't worry. That's what Zoom flaw.
We're gonna fix it. And you're an inspiration.
Thank you.
So I'd like you to talk about your childhood. I know it was tough. And although you didn't have an abusive family life, there was a lot of stress and strain there. You want to talk about that?
Sure. I appreciate that, Mark. And I appreciate Tambuli Media, because when I put up my first book, you came to me and said, "Hey, we want to take it. We want to upgrade it." I went, "Okay." And you guys literally ran with it. So I appreciate that. And, this is, as you know, since we've been friends for going on 30 years now, it's always about trying to help other people. Just so everybody knows, my website is under reconstruction. So burnwithkearns.com is not up right now. It should be up today or tomorrow. If they need to reach me, Kevin at burnwithkearns.com is the easiest way. Or I'm old school, as you know, 508-404-8503.
And
this is what I say to people.
Those contacts will be in the show notes for everyone.
This is what I say to people. I go, I have a phone. I use it. Anyway, I'm not a big fan of that velvet rope crap. Anyway, my family was great. My mother was one of 8. My father was one of 4. So we had no lie. We had 31 first cousins.
Jeez.
Yeah. Well, they're Irish. What do you want? Rhythm method doesn't work. So the tough part about that is I grew up in Everett, in the 70s. And Everett was pretty rough and tumble. It's in between. Everett is in between Chelsea, Malden, and Charlestown, which is pretty well known. And it was rough and tumble, mostly Italian, mostly Irish, some French, some people like that. And when you're as growing up, when you're in a neighborhood, that's your whole world, right? And I stunk at every sport. So when people look at Karate Kid, I go, they should make the movie about me, because that was me. As you know, I want to make always pick last into a movie,
Right.
because everybody reads it, goes, that should be a movie. I'm like, I know, but that's besides the point. I was the last to tie my shoes, last to take my training wheels off my bike. And I look at it today and I see these kids and all the stuff they're going through. Thank God for no social media back then. I don't know if I'd still be here. Fortunately and unfortunately, because I always believe in a double-edged sword, kind of like, Filipino arts, which you taught me, and still training in that, by the way. Double-edged sword, my father passed away when I was 12, and this is his ring. I don't take it off. He was only 48. Great guy. He just drank too much, Schlitz. I was,
Schlitz, yeah.
Smoked cigars and ate. And he literally, ended up passing away when I was 12. And that just crushed the whole family. We were living in a 3-family. To this day, my mother passed away from COVID in 2020. I don't know how we survived. I really don't. We were one of the poorer families in the neighborhood. My mom worked part-time. And then after my father passed, the bullying got 10 times worse. And thank God, 2 things happening. My mother, I kept going to my mother. I remember my father died literally February 19th on February vacation week. Talk about a shit week. And the tough part was I had just saw him a week before that. He was doing better. Then a couple of days before he died, he wasn't doing so good. And he passed during the night. My mother didn't wake me up. I got up on Monday, did my paperwork, came back. And as you know, in the book, my best friend's father's car was here. I was like, what's going on? And he was always, Ray Donnie, great guy, was always a practical joker. He goes, I to this day, and you read it in my book, everybody says, man, I thought you were talking to me in this book. Because as you know, when I write, I wear my heart in my sleeve, and people think that's a bad thing. I go, I'm blunt. That's why I'm working on my first TED Talk, because we got to get this out here. And, all this mental health stuff that we're working on next, we'll get into that. You got to be, you can't sugarcoat shit, right? And life's tough. Life's hard. Anybody who told you it was easy, they lied. So when he broke the news to me, I thought he was kidding. And then I realized he wasn't. And I'll tell you, and it's not in my book. This is something I probably should have put in. Mark's going to be like, okay, we'll do a 3rd edition. I went to a funeral after my dad's every year thereafter for the next 10 years of my family.
Jeez.
Cancer, you name it, emphysema. The hardest one was my cousin Georgie, who was about 3 years older than me. We were just getting drunk a few months before that. I was 15, and we're at a wedding, so of course you're sneaking booze. Plus I'm Irish, so it's kind of a prerequisite like you. And we're sneaking drinks, and then they moved to Florida, and he got involved with the wrong crowd, and he actually took a bullet to the head. Bad drug deal. 2 hours after Christmas. That really, set me off. So. But going back a little bit, the 2 good things that happened to me when you look at this is I kept going to my mother. As you know, in the book, I talk about that during the summer. And she finally had to push me away. So I had to become, I always tell kids this when I go out in front of audiences, do anti-bullying speeches in college and even universities and even corporations. I said, I had to be 21 when I was 12. I had to reverse it. I had a choice. You either got to go forward or you're stuck where you are. You can't tread water forever. And a close uncle taught me in taking karate at United Studios of Self-Defense with Charlie Matera, still a great guy, still has a lot of schools, and Paul Taylor. And that was it. And, what I found, almost like you did, because we have discussed this before in martial arts, it's like, oh, if you practice, you get better. Somebody actually put the time in. And then I was, there's a video up on Instagram that my team did in Pakistan for me. I have my own marketing team, and I was doing a what do you call it? A speaking contest. And they took like 12 minutes of this video and cut it down to like, I got my black belt. And the one thing I always remember about Charlie Matera and Paul Taylor telling me, and I always remember this is something you and I shared before too, is when I got my black belt, I'm like, oh, okay, I got my black belt. And they pulled me in, they're like, you're always a white belt. I'm like, what? Because the journey never stops.
Never stops. Never.
So I realized at 14 that it's okay to ask for help. So I went to the guys, and you remember the guys back in the day, because we're in the same age group, that looked like big gyms and G.I. Joes that like cut from glass. And they were, back in the 70s, training was rough, right? Training was rough. I mean, you would come home, busted nose, whatever. It was supposed to be non-contact to the face. You always got contact.
Right.
I remember we had 2 heavy bags in the gym, and after my father died, I got a vicious temper, but we had 2 heavy bags in the gym, and one was 100 pounds of sand. I would punch it every day, and I would literally scar up my knuckles. Yeah. I wanted them to, because that way if I fought, nothing would happen. And you remember in my book, one of my friends, this kickboxer from the gym, Louis Nuzzle, taught me, there's another bully in my life. The kid was big. He says, "You got a heavy bag?" I go, "Yeah." It was good. He goes, "You got a cement wall?" I go, "Yeah." He goes, "I want you to front kick and side kick that cement wall all the time you train." To this
Wow.
day, I think that's where the minute I squatted with weight, my legs exploded. And to this day, if I, roundhouse, if I tie kick somebody, then they ain't getting up. They ain't getting up. But that led that, I can still tell you the founding principles of United Studios, self-control, discipline, honor, integrity, effort, etiquette, and I've built my life on that discipline. When motivation dies, discipline has to take over, as you know.
That's extremely important statement. Please repeat that.
As motivation dies, so it gives me goosebumps. You can't fake that.
I know. I just got them too under my sweatshirt.
Motivation dies, discipline has to take over. It's like we have this philosophy in my system, Kevin Kearns, we call it the 3 pillars: proper exercise, proper nutrition, proper mindset, programming. And this is in my keynote. And we call it, you have to have the 2 C's and the 2 D's. And I just threw this out to LinkedIn. Now, the 2 C's are commitment and consistency. So what came first? Now, we had everybody chime in. Consistency was like 80%. I go, and it's a trick question. Got to have both, right? How can you be consistent if you're not committed? How can you be committed if you're not consistent? Now, 3 D's are determination, desire, dedication. Simple. Once you have it's, and I always tell people it's math. C plus C plus C, D plus D plus D equals what? Whole person.
Equals A.
Yeah, equals you. Equals YOU.
Right. I think a lot of people have, and myself included, because I've had a lot of hard times in
Absolutely.
my life, a ton of just loss.
Yes.
But I get overwhelmed. I work a ton, just like you. I never stop working. I'm 14, 15 hours a day on different things. You're just trying to forge forward, do your thing, make your way. There's no one there holding you up. There's no one helping you. You got to do it. So,
yeah, and I appreciate I really do appreciate your vulnerability with this, because, as you know, my second book is Light in the Tunnel. My second crash, if you want to get into that, we'll get into that now. And, going back for a second with what you talked about, this is what I try to tell people. People say, it drives me nuts when people say, well, marijuana is a gateway drug. No, sugar's a gateway drug. Caffeine's a gateway drug, and you don't need a license to do it. I go, when you know from traveling, right? Not to interrupt, from traveling, there's a 25% sugar tax over in Europe. 25% less sugar, and I'm going to shock you with this too. Now, as an exercise physiologist from UMass Boston in 1990, okay, the average body fat for a male was 12 to 15%. It is now 27%.
Jesus.
The average body fat for a female, because they have childbearing, was 25%. The average body fat for a female today is 37%.
What? I think some of that may be from all these sweetened coffee drinks. People think they're having coffee, but they're having 2 desserts in a liquid form. It's unbelievable.
You hit the nail on the head on that. And think about it this way, right? And you remember, and I always loved everything about you, because you are such a history nut. And when somebody said this to me, and it gives me goosebumps, my good friend who's got cancer right over here, he's very successful, great guy, high-level BJJ black belt, used to be a bull rider, professional. His grip is like he's like, can you let go of my hand, Jake? Great guy, but he said this. He just gave a speech last week. He goes, "You've heard this, and this is where you really come in. I'm going to give you props for this, if you don't mind." He said, "You've heard knowledge is power, right?"
Right.
He changed that. He goes, "Applied knowledge is wisdom."
Right.
And that's where you come in, because every time you've written a book, I was like, wow, man, Mark really gets down to the nitty gritty with the details of this shit. And that's what you want to do. So, as far as my second fall, as you know, I married my college sweetheart. Everything was going great.
Yeah.
And then we had 2 kids back to back. One was shake and bake, IVF, haha. And she fell into the trap of alcoholism.
Yeah.
Yep.
I remember. It's rough.
Yeah, and that was right about the time. Actually, that was about 10 years after you and I had met. And, I had a 6-month-old and a 2.5-year-old, and she drank every day. And I'm like, what do I do? And
so Kevin, at that time, do you start feeling like feelings of, Christmas past, because you're your father, right?
Yep.
You saw it happen with him, and now you're a high school sweetheart, mother of your children.
College, actually.
College sweetheart, I mean, how do you deal with that personally?
That was, you and I were raised the same because I'm Irish, Irish Catholic and half Italian. That's what people say
That's
anyway.
me, Irish Italian, McWop.
Me too. So, and sickness and in health. So it's like, okay. And I really didn't know anything about alcoholism, right? I just
Right.
knew my dad. And I'll tell you, it was bad. I mean, she slept on the couch. If it was a good night, it was 3 beers. If it was a bad night, it was 6. And she slept on the couch every night. And I couldn't wait for her to fall asleep. Now, the challenge is, and I'm not going to throw her underneath the bus, but I can. The challenge is, I don't know if you've ever heard this term, and you probably do because you've dealt with it and with other people, especially being Irish, dry drunk. That's basically
Hmm.
what she is. She got sober in 2010. That's when I put the serenity prayer on this arm to remind me, you can only change this. But the behavior, the narcissism stayed.
Right.
And then I
Right.
put up with it because the way we were raised, sickness and health, sickness and health. I put up with it as long as I could. And I'm like, and we're talking emasculation, you across the board. And it's funny
Right.
because one of my best friends, Scott O'Keefe, Professor Scott O'Keefe in Nyack, said, he goes, and I think you mentioned this too, the anti-bullying quote unquote expert, which I don't like that term, but was bullied at home, was
Right.
bullied. And
Right.
my business is exploding. And I'm like, and shit's going sideways at home. And I'm
Right.
like, what do you do? And I'll tell you, what happened is it was a very, as you know, we've talked about this, it was very messy. It was very
Yeah.
bloody. Somebody attacked my gas meter in my house.
Remember.
I
Yeah.
mean, and then she tried to get me on a false domestic. And at the same token, she turned my kids against me. And when we were doing 50-50, my kids haven't spoken to me. Emily hasn't spoken to me in over a year. Shannon was living with me for about a year. And then she talked her into moving out and got the cops involved.
I'm sorry.
Yeah. And
Well,
that's a hole in my heart I have to deal with because from knowing me for years how involved I was with my kids,
yeah.
and now they don't speak to me. And what do? You can only
Right.
do so much, right? They got to
I
figure it
have
out for
another
themselves.
friend who is going through, well, he wasn't married, but he has a child with a woman, and he couldn't see her for 6 years. And now he's finally getting custody. And it's every week he's in court, and he just loves his child so much. And it's like, it's tough for the dads, you know.
It's really hard, and I'll tell you, step back for a second, and this going through divorce, it's like you already have the stress of a failure of divorce,
Right.
right?
Absolutely.
Then you have it costs me over $100,000 for a $20,000 divorce. Then you have
Right.
the PTSD with the gas meter. Then you have, the emasculation. You have all that other, and you have that baggage. And then, oh, by the way, now you're going to start dating at 50. What?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
taken me 5 years to finally meet somebody that I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you, people say, well, um, this is something I say all the time. It's easy to meet people. It's hard to meet quality people.
Right.
And no offense to women out there, but women think, well, guys are just out for one thing. I'm like, let me tell you something. I've had the same thing done to me. I've been ghosted,
Right.
one night stand. I've been, what do they call it? Cat. It's all been done. It's no
All of it.
different.
Yeah.
And then you come out there and you're a gentleman and and I think the problem with the dating scene with the apps, here's the problem. And you'll like this because it's going to be kind of like an equation or an idea behind like people overeating. It's a buffet, right? Oh, this
Right.
is going great, but wait, maybe this person's better. Well, guess what? When you find what you want, shut up.
Right.
And I tell everybody, I go, and the challenge is, as you've been through it too, you're going to have your red flags. Your radar is going to be on, and you have to deal with what you can accept, what you can't. Because you and I might write another book, and my girlfriend wants to write it too. And I call it, I go rules for dating. And one of my rules for men, I tell this to young men all the time. I go, rule number one: always be a gentleman. Yes, I believe in women's lib, but pull out the chair, open the card, and if they don't like it, tough.
Yeah.
Then like my second rule is rule number two. Rule number two: don't give her flowers on Valentine's Day. Just give her flowers whenever. Everybody does it. So I
Right.
can keep going on, but I digress from
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
But with my kids, the real turning point was in 2019 when she convinced them to move out permanently, and then it led me down the path of attempting suicide twice.
Yeah. And I know, man, I grappled with suicidal thoughts in high school
Yeah, I
and
remember you telling me.
middle school and high school. I didn't fit in. I went to a private school. I didn't fit in with the other kids there. My interests were to the left of theirs. It was martial arts, mysticism. You want to train, you want to practice. You don't want to be just like hanging out, just doing normal stuff. My mom was super hard on me. She's a psychologist, but she was never like a mother. She
Psychologist for you.
was She was always, so I'd come home, Mom, and this and that, and this girl or this guy did this or that. And she'd say, you know what, get over it and get yourself therapy. I never had a mom to talk to about stuff.
Mm.
So as a kid, you can arrange your mind around activities and having something to look forward to. But as an adult, what you were going through, your kids aren't talking to you, your wife's framing you for all kinds of stuff. And on Christmas Eve, I'm going to remember 2019, you wake up and
In
you're in a
McLean
ward.
Hospital. Yep.
Yeah.
Thank God
That's
thank
rough.
God my therapist committed me. I mean, that scar on my neck is real.
Right.
And I took a course with Jenny Thrasher out of Minneapolis, Minnesota, about how to talk. She's a therapist, but she doesn't promote that, how to talk around suicide.
Right.
And the big thing people say is, like, it was a great course. I'll recommend. I'll put you in touch with her. Her father, and listen to these words: my father died from suicide or of suicide, not
Yeah.
commit. You know what I mean?
Right.
Because people think, well, it's a chicken way out. But she goes, and we did one of my friends and I did a 5-day course with her, and she goes, look, when people commit suicide, it's because they're in so much pain they just want it to end. It
Right.
isn't a cop out, isn't this and that. It goes, they just went in so much pain. And, my business was failing. I'm trying to date. I had a failed relationship back then. My divorce, I was broke. And now my kids are moving out. And then to top it out, off, I have to talk about another crash. As I come out of McLean and I'm feeling better, thank God for ECT therapy, and I'm involved with McLean deconstructing the stigma. My poster is probably up some airport or whatever. And what ends up happening is COVID hits and I lose 90% of my business overnight.
Right.
90%. Like,
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, now what? But talk about timing. So that's why I say, when I got the inspiration, thank God for Coach Steve Whittier from SBG East, because I was kind of off the grid for a while. And he said, I want you to come out in January 2020 and talk about something that was difficult. He coached me on certain things on social media. So I came out and talked about my depression for 5 minutes. We had like 3,000 views in a day. My phone started ringing off the hook. And to date, I've worked with probably 22 people that have been close to suicide, anxiety, depression. My phone just started ringing. I said, you know what? And then I got the inspiration to write this book.
There's
And
light in the tunnel.
there's
Yeah.
light in the tunnel, how to survive and thrive with depression. And I tell people, I am not a therapist. I am a wellness transformation coach. Okay. I'm gonna come at this a completely different way. I'm not saying therapy's bad. I'm not saying medication's bad. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying this is what worked for me. And if you listen to all the statistics, every therapist will recommend exercise, nutrition, meditation, all of that. And we've
All
known
that
it for
raises your dopamine, and your serotonin levels, and
exactly.
that elevates your mood, right? It
Mm-hmm.
elevates all the chemicals in your body to feel good.
Catecholamines, all that, right?
Right.
I always tell people, it's like having a slice of chocolate cake, but you don't feel guilty afterwards.
Right.
And I tell people, I go, look, I've been working out for almost 45 years now. I said, do you think I want to go to yoga some days? No. Do you think I want to go to martial art class? No. Do you think I'm going to do my strength training on my own? No. But those are the workouts that count the most.
And that brings us back to your notion that not notion, but the rule that says you got to be committed.
Absolutely.
Right.
You just,
Even when you don't want to do it, you got to do it. Yeah.
sorry. Clients coming in.
Yeah.
Big Ant. Yeah, it's just, it's hard. I always tell people, listen, I said, it's based on, and I know you've read the book several times, the Tao Te Ching. It's cyclical,
Oh yeah.
right? Cyclical. And I remember Dr. Wayne Dyer, the late Wayne Dyer, knock on wood,
Yeah.
saying, if you're on the top of the mountain, don't celebrate too long because the valley's coming. And if you're in the valley, you know what? Don't, cry in your own sake, because you got to go forward. And that's the whole thing is I always quote that quote that he always says, don't get stuck in the wake of your life. The wake's what's left behind the boat. And it's not easy.
Right.
Several, and this from being successful yourself, is when people look at success, it's not a straight line. It's all over the damn place. And that's life.
Yeah.
And life is a journey, and it's not a destination. That's why I look at Matthew McConaughey. I love those, I think it's 13 Truths. He doesn't believe in, and I don't either. He doesn't believe in the word happiness. Okay. Because he said, happiness denotes an outcome. I'll be happy when this book sells. I'll be happy when my book gets made into a movie. I'll be happy when I get this job. He goes, you're always raising the bar versus joy is always in process. And he said, I made more money, more accolades, and had more success when I got lost in the process. And then he reverts to like Bo Jackson. He goes, Bo Jackson would run through the goal line and into the stands. You had to tell him he scored.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and I think that is the biggest thing. And I also think too is, as Dr. Wayne Dyer would say, is there any real failure, or did you just produce results you didn't anticipate?
Right. Well, that's it.
And it's not simple. I mean, I've spent, you know, when you look at, and you know this by living on the East Coast, when we look further south, Florida, Texas, those states are booming. They're way ahead of the curve for us. We're still in the East Coast. We're still behind the 8 ball. We're still coming out of the pandemic. And when you look at the pandemic, you know, a good friend of mine, Sean Shinnick, who's part of the McLean Hospital Project Deconstructing Stigma, he said, COVID was the pandemic. That's true. It was a pandemic. And it exposed the real pandemic, which was mental health.
Right.
I mean, here are the stats as of 2 months ago. WHO stated, World Health Organization, 798 million people worldwide with mental illness. 1 in 3 in America. Largest increase since COVID is 11 to 17-year-olds, 48% increase. Mental Health Alliance worldwide stated that there is a 500% increase people looking for help. I mean, think about it. One of my mentors, Professor Tim Barshad, said, he goes, we're telling people to stay locked in and isolated. That's what you do to prisoners for punishment.
Yeah, it's horrible.
So we don't.
You know, suicide is at an all-time high.
Oh my God.
Let's talk a little bit about your fitness model.
Sure.
Because I know, okay, so way back in the 90s, you were traveling around 5 a.m. to clients' houses with a trunk full of toys.
Still doing it.
You're still doing it. And you had, you know, you had the BOSU.
Yep.
You know, you had just
bands, BOSU, agility ladder,
right,
body blade. I still got all, you know,
body blade. Yep.
Yeah. Because you know, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Well, you know, I started that when I was doing my internship in 1989 with Joe and Jimmy from One-to-One Personal Training, and it took to me. So when you really look at the, you know, the personal fitness coaching model, I don't really like the term trainer because you got to be a coach. Right. And when I have a certification system, as you know, based on my Burma Kearns MMA conditioning basement tapes, which we are actually releasing the new ones.
Oh, great.
New ones. Yeah. We have 14 years of new content going to be in a vault coming up, and a whole master trainer program that's coming out in the whole bit in the next couple of weeks. And what we did with that is I've tried everything, as you know, like I owned a gym, right? So I did the one-on-one, right? And when you look at this business, you have a couple different options before Zoom. You can go one-on-one to clients' homes. You can work in a gym and give them a percentage, or you can open your own studio. Okay. Mm-hmm. Or you can go straightly online. Straight online doesn't appeal to me because you know me well enough. I can't sit behind a desk. Plus, there's less personal contact. When I have to do it, I mean, I've got clients in the East Coast, in New York. I've got clients overseas. I've got clients here. You know, that's all fine because that's what at least I can, you know, I'll be working with you. That is better than not working with them. And that's the way I look at it. Plus, when clients travel. Now, people have to understand, it's not an easy business because you're under commission all the time.
Right.
All the time. Now, I've tried studios, I've tried this, I've tried that, and it's just like, you look at it like, wow, man, you do a lot of driving. I go, yeah, but I'm my own boss. And when you think about it, if I own a gym or a studio, now I've got overhead, utilities, right? Maybe staffing issues. You got to come to me. Versus if I'm driving, okay, my mileage is going up, and in Massachusetts, I'm getting 63 cents a mile. There's a tax write-off.
Right.
So that's the way I look at it. And you know, is it always fun being in the car that much? No, it's not. And you try to have it, you know, set up with people all around the area. So I bounce them back and forth between doing that, doing this. But as far as the system, our roots are basically in this. We believe in 8 elements. So you do this every day, and you'll probably know this from martial arts. We push every day, pull, locomotion, balance, static strength, rotation, flexibility, and level change. So when I look at programming, if they don't have that 8, you're screwed. And then our primary core principle is real simple: effective, efficient, and safe. And the last one is the most important: safe. Because you've seen all this CrossFit shit, all this crap go on, and I look at it and go, Like I even said to somebody the other day, I looked at somebody, I was talking to my girlfriend about this. I go, why is deadlifting bad? She looked at me. She goes, the bar's in the wrong position. I go, right. I go, because what is a deadlift? Picking up a dead body. You didn't put the bar didn't go forward. It's between the feet are between your legs.
Right.
You know, so when I see these people, you're deadlifting 600 pounds. I go, what's the point? Just like,
Right.
One of
No
my
functional element to it.
no,
It's just
and
an activity.
no, and you look at people like my good friend, veteran Marcus Davis, the Irish hand grenade. Marcus said, he goes, Coach, he goes, I owe it to you. I got my degree in movement therapy. That's what he does now. He goes, and I see people, he goes, you're the one who turned me on to bands and medicine balls. He goes, I see people like squatting with weight on their back, and I'm going, that is just so bad for your spine, And you're talking about someone that used to do it. I mean, I used to leg press close to 1,000 pounds,
Right.
1,000.
Yeah.
But I'm like, I haven't done that. My girlfriend looks at me. She goes, how the hell do you have such huge legs? I go, yoga, martial arts, and all this stuff. Like over the summer last year, I got this crazy idea because actually during COVID, not to digress, I had a client in Texas. We couldn't get medicine balls at all.
Wow.
So he started using a patio brick. And I went, huh. And when you think about bricklayers, so my dumbbells, quote unquote, I don't use them like real like people normally use dumbbells. You know what my dumbbells are? Cinder blocks.
Cinder blocks.
Half
nice.
a cinder block is 17 and a half, and you have to grip it.
Right. You get your finger grips. Yeah. Nice. It's all functional.
So it has to be.
People who can't see you, we're recording this, so on YouTube it'll be a video, but on Amazon and Google and Spotify it'll just be audio. But they have to Google you because your abs are just ripped and your biceps are ripped and your thighs are ripped and you're not using Nautilus, you're not lifting free weights in the gym,
and I haven't done a drug in my life.
Right. It's because you see a lot of people using bands and straps and different things, and they're not getting ripped because I think they're not doing it. They must not be doing it right.
Well, here's
you built your program around this ancillary equipment, and that it's a functional fitness, right?
And I built my fighters over it too. I remember you can listen to Marcus Davis on that interview for Gas in the Tank going, I thought I had to lift heavy. Right. I realized I didn't. And now he's 50 and he's like, yeah, coach, he's like, you were the one that turned me on to not heavy lifting. I mean, and when I rebuilt Kenny Florian, Kenny, the big joke with Kenny Florian is Dana White used to say he's a fighter that doesn't look like the fighter.
Right.
And then after Sean Strick, people like he's on steroids. I'm like, nope. And he was the best test case, right. And that built the rest of the business. But when you look at it, I always tell people, I like to break it down, and you're the same as me, make it simple, right? It's math. If I activate more joints, I activate more muscles, I burn more calories. I mean, our Fit to Fight protocol, Gas in a Tank protocol, we've measured this with an athlete. We had Kenny doing it. Now, that formula was what's called a HIP protocol, but it's my formula of 2.1, 2 to 1 ratio versus 2 to 1. Okay. So in other words, we gave everybody 5 extra seconds of gas. 5 extra seconds of an exercise gave them a minute of extra gas. It worked. Right. We did it for MMA. We did it for grappling. We did it for football. We did it for college hockey. We did it for NBA. You name it. It fit we were able to fit that model any way we want, as long as we know the parameters of what the activity is.
Right.
The fun part about that is we're not using heavy weights. We're using bands. We're using crazy stuff. The surge. We're using BOSUs, this, that, and the other thing. But here's the fun part. When we filmed Kenny that day, 2007, doing that workout, we weren't even pushing it. That day, he burned 475 calories in 17 minutes.
Wow.
Now, fast forward that,
you can't do that on a treadmill. Cardio can't do that for you, but this kind of functional training can do it. That's crazy.
Correct. And let's make it one step better. Now, as you know, I was doing a lot with the martial art world and everything else, and then fitness started paying attention to me.
Right.
I remember going to the first Idea World Fitness. I think you might remember that, 2010, and they're like, we discovered you. I'm like, you discovered me? Please. So this is on video, okay? You have 10,000 trainers in the house, okay? 10,000 trainers. My class is sold out, 250 trainers. Now, martial arts and trainers, they're like this. What has he got to offer? Even though they signed up. So the house is packed. They're filming me, legit. They're filming me doing this, right? And I got a booth, the whole 9 yards. I'm selling my videos. And I'm up there, and they made me do PowerPoint. And I hate PowerPoint. I just want to go. And I'm cracking the same jokes that I'm cracking with my martial arts schools, and I'm getting nothing. I'm like, uh-oh. And then it was like Bugs Bunny. A sign came up. Now what, Rabbit? And I go, literally, excuse the French, fuck it. I swung for the fence. It was like my dad goes, just swing for the fence, Kevin. Then I got out there, and I got all the call and response. Last one, best one, coach. Hustle equals it's muscle, coach. I'm like, let's go. I had them eaten out of my hands. Now, the fun part about that is, and the reason I say this, and it's in a full article, I think you have it, I can send it again, is Heather Coyle, who I didn't know, said to me, she was like 35, unbelievably fit. I said, this burns so many calories. Now, she's 14% body fat as a female athlete. She's 35. She yells out 45 minutes into class, 887 calories, coach.
Holy cow.
So we've clocked our caloric output anywhere from 45 minutes to an hour, anywhere from 1,000 to 1,200 calories. Now, if you need to lose a pound of fat, what do you need to do? Burn 3,600 kilocalories. We've done it in corporations. I have data from corporations like UPS. Our average weight loss, 12 to 15 pounds over 3 months with a 25-year-old to 60-year-old.
Nice.
So why not?
So results speak.
Results speak.
And you can't have success without measuring. If you can't measure something, you can't know if you're succeeding, and you have all this data on the measurement.
We have the data to back it up. And at the end of the day, I always say this to people. I go, throw out the scale. It's a number. Mm-hmm. You want to maintain muscle mass and lose body fat. Like I'm 177 and I'm 5'7". So they would tell me my body mass index is too high. Yet I'm at 10% body fat. So I'm like, shut up.
Well, because the muscle weighs more than fat.
It's so stupid. So,
right.
But literally if you, with that proper idea base behind mental health, do something. Like even me, I mean, I can still consider myself a mental health patient, but I'm not going to lie. Back in March, I had a bout of anxiety. I had, what do you call it? I had panic attacks that were waking me up at 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning. Jeez. And it was financial, obviously.
Yeah.
It was being worthy of somebody new in the world. And thank God I still see my therapist every couple of weeks in the whole bit. And, thank God for my GF, because she kind of like calmed me down and said, listen, she's like, let's talk this out. Let's do this. Let's do that. And, got me over the hump, literally.
Everybody needs somebody in their corner. Therapist, coach, significant other. It's super important. At
the end of the day, when you look at, and I know we want to concentrate on the whole mental health aspect, and that's why, I am working on my first TEDx, and I've spent a lot of money doing it over the next 6 months, I hope, because it's something that has to be addressed. When you and I both agree, this new generation, we don't know the impact of COVID socially. We haven't, socially, not even economic, but socially. I mean, these kids don't know how to interact. They don't. And here's the other problem: the way we grew up, right? If you couldn't say it in the playground, you didn't say it. And what would Mike Tyson say? The plan works is you get punched in the face. Well, guess what? Back in the day, if somebody didn't like what you said, you get smacked in the face. But now everybody's, people are oversensitive face to face and insensitive online. I can say whatever I want. I have no, there's nothing's going to happen to me. Oh, really? We have to go back to some level of self-control. We have to go back to some level of ownership, and personal responsibility. But based on the new book, we're doing our first, I think I sent you the link. We're doing our first, what we call Eagle Warrior. You'll like that. Look, it's got swords and a shield. I came up with this in our foundation, Vision, Passion, Perseverance, which is on this arm. Hold your vision, keep your passion, maintain and invest in your perseverance. We're doing our first Eagle Warrior, Kevin Kearns Eagle Warrior retreat in Tuscany in October. Still, we only got 14 spots left, and it's going to be 2.5 days with me. Well worth it, going over proper exercise, proper nutrition, proper mindset programming for 2.5 days. Tuscany in October.